Well, welcome to the Daily Word, the teaching ministry of Redeemer Bible Church in Gilbert, Arizona. My name is Tim. I'm one of the pastors here. And in this episode, we are continuing the Gospel of Luke, looking at chapter 23, verse 1 through 25. And I'm in the ESV. I failed to mention that earlier. So we pick up the story where Jesus is facing the assembly before Pilate. Verse 1, Then the whole company of them arose and brought him before Pilate, and they began to accuse him, saying, We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king. And Pilate asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? And he answered them, You have said so. Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, I find no guilt in this man. Even though I know how this ends, every time I read that part, my heart leaves because I know he's not guilty of what they're accusing him of. And for a half a second, I think, different story. Nope, the story has to change. Nope, it's obviously not to be. Verse 5, But they were urgent, saying, He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea from Galilee, even to this place. When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who himself was in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him, because he had heard about him, and he was hoping to see some sign done by him. So here's another example of Jesus not wanting to be the circus sideshow. It had devolved later in his ministry that people were there just for the miracles. Is that us? Is that the way we do it? I think so. I think at some part we have this sense that we want the dramatic, we want the profound. It's kind of a moment to check yourself and ask, why do we listen and to whom do we listen to? Are we looking for truth or to be entertained? Verse 9. So he questioned him at some length, but he made no answer. The chief priests and the scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. And Herod, with his soldiers, treating him with contempt and mocked him. Then arraying him in splendid clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. And Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day, for before this they had been at enmity with each other. That's such an odd little aside with Herod and Pilate. Like they rallied around Jesus, a man they were trying to convict, or the mobs were trying to kill, and they had their happy moment. And I don't know, and I probably should find out what the source of their discord was, but it all washed away when they got in front of Jesus. So 13, Pilate then called together the chief priests and rulers and the people, and said to them, You brought me this man as one who is misleading the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of the charges against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent them back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore punish and release him. There's various levels of punishment, but it seemed like story over. But when I was a kid, I saw the movie Barabbas. It's dated, but it's an interesting movie, but it had a massive effect on me. I was probably 8 years old, and I knew all this was going to happen. I knew the story of Jesus and the crucifixion, but the justice part of me was outraged, and it stuck with me for a long, long time. This just makes no sense. Well, verse 18, But they all cried out together, Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas, a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city and for murder. Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, Crucify, crucify him. A third time he said to them, Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish and release him. Well, this sounds familiar in today's mob mentality. Sane voices can get shouted down and marginalized. In the midst of the mayhem, Jesus stands strong and resolute. It is a high bar for us to aspire to. Verse 23, But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate decided that their demand should be granted. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will. The legacy of Pilate was hanging in the balance, and he gave in to the masses. He had a chance to be a hero, but the story had been written, and he played his part. This is a tough section to read, because we know the story is still massively impactful. His ability to stare down his accusers and not sin is incredible. This can be feeling foreign to us, because in this day and age, he would have had a lawyer, he would have had an appeal, He would have gone to all kinds of lengths, but there justice was swift, and it wasn't justice, it was mob rule. But in God's story, this is the way it has to happen. As hard as it is to read and accept, tomorrow we'll talk more about who Jesus was in the midst of all this. It's really an incredible story. So see you tomorrow.